Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artists Index. And today's guest is an important part of the South Coast's creative community. I'm going to do a brief prelude on this. When I once worked many years ago for the Office of Historic Preservation, our daily routines were from City Hall, where our office was, to the New Bedford Public Library, genealogy room, the reference room, the registry of deeds, and the old Standard Times morgue. No, they didn't keep bodies there. They just kept newspaper clippings there. The correct term is newspaper library, but they always refer to it as the morgue. And in going to the library was absolutely amazing. I think even back in those days where you could just go up into the mezzanine, and going up those two steps, and on the left-hand side were flat files loaded with James Audubon prints that you could just open the drawer and help yourself to looking at them. Things have changed, and all for the better. And with that in mind, I'm going to allow today's guest to introduce themselves and spell their names for us, and just to tell us a little bit about themselves. Thank you.
So, hi, I'm Allie Copeland. I spell it A-L-L-I-E, and Copeland, C-O-P-E-L-A-N-D. Real name's Alexandra, but I prefer Allie. I'm the art curator for the New Bedford Free Public Library. I've been here for about 3.5 years now. So a good chunk of pandemic time and a good chunk of open time. Basically my job is to take care of the historic art collection in the New Bedford Library, which is part of our larger special collections department, which, as you mentioned, includes the genealogical material, the history room, the archive. And basically I run the art room and I take care of our art. So that's kind of my purview here at the library.
Since a lot of water has flowed under the bridge, I think at one time the room that you operate out of, they used to refer to as the treasure room. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. At some point it was the treasure room, and for a while it was closed. And
for a long time.
I know that I've seen pictures of it, stacked with things that sort of they knew were valuable, but they didn't have anyone on staff yet to deal with them. Our special collections for a long time was run by a historian, Paul Sear. And so now the history room is actually named after him. It's the Paul Sear History Room. So he was in charge of special collections as a whole, but that's a lot of material. They didn't really get a lot of real organization and opening up this room until about 10 years before I was hired. So what is that, 13, 14 years ago now? My predecessor, Janice, was the first art curator that the library had.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Because I remember also at one time in the basement of City Hall, you would see this incredible work just down there. And, it's a basement. Basement is a nice environment. And it would be like, oh, my goodness, this is crazy. Why can't something be done about it? And obviously they did. A lot of painters, painters, liked to tell people, hey, there's is that a Lansdowne George Washington or an Athenaeum George Washington that we have?
It's a copy of the, it's not technically the Lansdowne because his hand is in a different position. It's the, the name is escaping me. I assume it's copied after the one that's in the Providence State House.
Right, and that's a Gilbert Stuart?
After Gilbert Stuart, yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't Gilbert Stuart that copied it. It was more likely his daughter. That's another story.
Yeah, well, there's a really interesting. I've got 4 boxes of documentation on that Washington portrait, which right now is actually not on view because it's being conserved. We got some money from the CPA this past round of CPA funding, which was great. It's a huge painting, so it was an expensive prospect to have it conserved, and it really needed it. So right now its frame is empty in the art room, but yeah, there's some good correspondence between the director at the time, and there was an art historian who was convinced it was a real Stuart and published on it, and then convinced the director of the same, and then got some backlash from the art history community to say there's no way that's a Stuart, and basically kind of calling this guy a fraud, and he actually ended up suing Art News, I believe, for an article they published about it. So yeah, I've got 4 boxes of correspondence about just this painting, and we still don't know who painted it. We have it as unknown. Gilbert Stuart's daughter, maybe. I think it could have been William Allen Wall, who did the one in the city council chambers. I think this one could also be a Wall, but unknown.
Yeah, it's people refer to the unfinished George Washington. That's the iconic George Washington portrait head. A lot of people call it the dollar bill George Washington. But my old art history teacher, Evan Firestone, said that Gilbert was a bit of a rascal. He was a Yankee, and he was an artist, and he needed money. So he just really prolonged. He intentionally never finished that piece, so that at night he would bring the progressive home, and his daughter would start knocking off as many copies. So she was his copyist. And I always thought that was like a great story,
Yeah.
Another great claim to fame would be the Bierstadts.
Yes, definitely. So we have 3 paintings by Albert Bierstadt. So he's probably the most well-known artist other than Audubon in the collection. Certainly the most well-known of the Hudson River School that we have here. And we're very lucky to have the 3 we do have. One of them was donated, but the other 2 were purchased. So we had a director, the second librarian of the New Bedford Free Public Library was George Tripp, and he was really interested in art. And so we actually attribute a good portion of our more important paintings to his tenure, because he actually put funds into purchasing things. So he bought 2 of them from Edward Bierstadt, which was Bierstadt's brother's estate after he died, for I think about $1,600 at the time, which obviously at that point they were basically contemporary, which is sort of a nod to buying contemporary art, because in 100 years or so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all contemporary right now.
Yeah, exactly.
in that point. Yeah.
So they hang in the art room, and they're beautiful, and they're something that people come specifically to see, and we're really proud to display. So
now, I had just finished wrapping up a series of 5 podcasts with the library director at the Millicent Library in Fairhaven, right across the river, Kyle DeSico Carey, and we did Charles Henry Gifford, R. Swain Gifford, William Bradford, Lemuel Eldred, and the last one was Albertus Van Beest. And it's amazing. I mean, well, it is no different than today. I mean, several of them were contemporaries. There's this thing where either Bradford taught Van Beest or Van Beest taught Bradford. It gets very, very fuzzy, very, very murky. But do you have anything in the collection of either of those gentlemen, and include specifically Van Beest, because it was a beast finding anything on him? No pun intended. Yeah, puns intended. Yeah.
We have art from all of those guys that you mentioned there. So we have something from everybody. Van Beest is an interesting question. We have 2 of his sketches that were charcoal sketch type things. As recently, one of my projects I've been going through, after having done an inventory, going through the things that were not located in that inventory. And there are two paintings by Albert Van Beest that were stolen at some point in our history. And actually the library at that point did a police report and reported it to the FBI, stolen art thing. It's a, so I have pictures of those two paintings, but not the actual painting. So I've been thinking about the possibility of putting out a call for local people to say, I know this happened in the past. It probably wasn't you. Like,
Yeah, it's just hanging over your mantle.
Have you seen this painting? So we don't have any paintings in the building by Van Beest, but we should. Is my little answer to that, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you have a photograph of him?
Of Van Beest?
Yeah, it's very hard to find. I mean, I just could not bring one. The Whale Museum didn't have one. Kyle searched through everything because he's going through. He's your curators. You know what it's like, and archivists, and every day is cleaning out a closet.
Oh yeah. Well, and they have a rare Bierstadt portrait, which is great. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. For some reason, I'm thinking I have like a sketch of him, but I'd have to look at my catalog. I think it might have been maybe it's a sketch by him of someone else. For some reason, that's ringing a bell for me.
Right. But he was a interesting guy. Reminds me of de Kooning. I don't know if it's endemic to the Dutch, but it's sort of like,
Yeah. Well, if you read Eldred, Lemuel Eldred wrote for the Standard Times, I believe, and a couple other local newspapers, and so he sometimes describes these local guys. I wonder if he wrote about Van Beest. We have the book of his basically all the articles he published. Yep. One of his relatives published into a book we have here at the library. So yeah, he'll describe Bradford and all those guys, and yeah.
Nothing's really changed. I mean, artists are artists. It's kind of a cool thing. What's now with before your tenure, I don't know how many years it's been now for the New Bedford Art Museum, which is kind of a misnomer, not to cast anything, because they really don't have a collection. So you get into that finite thing. Only the art geeks, art industry, art professional geeks, art industry professional geeks would get into. But there are way more works that the city owns, and by the city I mean the library and other entities within the city. When will it ever be possible to show that work, or to conserve, archive all of it, or is that just
so we have our relationship with the Art Museum. As you said, they don't keep a collection of their own. We have an agreement with them. I do 3 shows a year over there. Basically, in terms of what's been going over there recently and what's up now, we have I have a few of our Audubon prints up now. I've been kind of trying to show some of our works on paper, which are pretty much the things that don't get art on the walls. There is sort of a misconception that we have a ton in storage. The library's holdings, 99% of our paintings are on the walls. The 1% that's in storage is either in poor condition and can't be shown, or is like almost a duplicate. We have a work by the same artist that's very similar, and so we just have one of them on the wall. So that's kind of with the paintings. I always say, if you want to see one of our paintings, it's here. It's in the library. It's available whenever the library is open. So, but with the works on paper that can only be shown temporarily, one of the great things about our relationship with the Art Museum is that the library doesn't have good temporary exhibit space. We have a space in the hall here on the 3rd floor with cases, which I do utilize for exhibits, but bringing things over to the Art Museum allows us to show some of our works on paper. So those are the things that are really in storage. And of course, there's a good number of those. And they are available in terms of research. If someone said, oh, I know you have this Currier and Ives print and I'd love to see it, people can get in touch with me. I'll pull it and bring it out and have them look at it. But in terms of display, yes, we try to use the art museum for those kinds of things.
On one of your days where you're rattled and frizzled and so on and so forth, and somebody asks you about a beard start, and you go, beard start, beard start. It's always got to be a beard start. Why can't it be? Nobody ever talks about. So what does no one ever talk about that you'd love more people to know about that's in the collection?
Oh, good question.
Ah.
Well, first, if people want beer stats, I'm not going to judge.
Yeah.
I try to be a judgment-free art curator sitting at my desk. So people come in with zero knowledge, people come in with secondhand knowledge, and that's fine. You know, I answer all questions. I suppose, well, my favorite painting in the collection is The Black Sheep by Francis Davis Millett, which is hung in the third floor. So when people come in and they ask, you know, or if I want to talk about a painting, that's the one I go to, because there's just such a great story behind it, and also I just think it's a great painting. So I like to point that one out to people. I also really like to point out some of our contemporary work on the second floor, because people think, oh, all of this was collected in the 1800s. This is all, you know, or 1900s. And I'm like, no, we're still actively collecting. Like, we still take in art, and we have an active collections committee, and we, you know, are still growing the collection today. And, you know, so that's one of the things. I guess those are maybe the two things I would want people to know about.
And when you're saying you're still actively collecting, does that mean, for example, let's talk about more contemporary artists. I think I may have seen a Milton Brightman, at least one or two, either between City Hall and the museum. Who else is in that collection?
So we have Milton Brightman. Down on we have Nancy Hayes. We have Sig Haynes. So a good number of our artists, especially contemporary, are associated with Swain School of Design. So we have a David Loeffler Smith. We have Adrian Teo, Mel Zabarski, a photographer whose name is escaping me. Ernest Pettingill is not super contemporary, but close enough.
Right.
So yeah, there's a number.
And it just sounds so sleazy. So how do other painters get involved in this acquisition system?
Yes. So one of the things I have to say is we don't have a purchasing budget. So for the most part, we cannot pay artists for their work. So that's a thing that sometimes puts a damper on things. I want artists to get paid for the work that they do. And I know that that's an important part of being a working artist, obviously.
Always has been.
So, you know, with some exceptions, there just really isn't a budget for it. So if there are patrons or artists who would like to donate their work, basically those people would have to reach out to me, either send me a photo or a picture. I can let them know if I'm interested in possibly adding to the collection. And then they would bring it in. I would do research, assess condition, how it fits into the collection, if we can care for it, various things. All of our collecting policies are written down and available. I can send those to artists as well. And then it goes through our art committee of the Board of Trustees. And so everything has to be approved by the Board of Trustees before it can be added to the permanent collection. So at that point, it gets either accessioned or returned to the artist. And accession means how I've described it is that we've made a commitment to care for the object for the life of the institution, which for the library, we hope is
a
forever.
long time. Our Father Guido Sarducci, the character Don Novello created, the comedian, forever and ever. And he said, why do we say that? I think forever kind of covers it.
Yeah, until the Buzzards Bay gets high enough, New Bedford is no more.
The rapture of Buzzards Bay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the follow-up question to that is, there are people who have artwork in their homes, and some of them know that it was painted by a relative, an acquaintance, or whatever. Some of them know that it was a piece that's been handed down, and they're at a certain age where they are now downsizing, and if they were to contact the library as to whether or not the library was interested in acquiring the work, I want to make clear that, for example, a living artist, until a piece of artwork has been sold, it has no value. So that's when you get tapped on the shoulder for that auction. All you can write off as an artist is the canvas and paint. Yet, if a non-artist or someone who's in possession of a painting that they bought, or they're in possession of a painting they didn't paint, they put it up for auction. They say, what's the value of this? And they say, oh, it's $250. They can write off to $250. So with that said, and I'm thinking all of a sudden now, WGBH, about do you have a car you no longer want?
Yes.
But is there a program that the library has that, because, it's unfortunate. I mean, and we're probably speaking more about work of probably mid-century on to now. It may be, a squidge before that, World War II. But with so many artists of that generation passing on, we've had these conversations before, fellow artist Don Wilkinson and a bunch of other artists. Unfortunately, either the stuff ends up in a bonfire or in a dumpster.
Yeah.
And because the families are overwhelmed by what they have. Do you have any suggestions?
So I will say a good number of our donations from patrons come from that kind of situation where it's an older person who is either moving into a smaller space or just knows that their family is not going to be interested in the things that they collected over time. And so people who can kind of look at that when they're thinking about their lives, I think we really appreciate, because, I know as a daughter, that it's much harder to go through those things after someone has passed and then think about how important this was, and not having the knowledge of that parent saying, oh, well, I bought this in this place, it's by this artist. And so that little knowledge is really important. So yes, a lot of our donations come from that. In terms of giving things value, I can't provide a value. I will direct people to those auction houses to say, hey, you might be able to get a price from a Skinner, from Marion Antique Auctions in the area as well. Or any other person who's in the business of selling art could give you a value. Like you said, it's a tough proposition if it's a minor artist to say, what is it worth? And minor artist is just saying that it's not something that's sold often or that, is well known. But in that case, then, donating to the library is a write-off. We we do count towards your taxes for a write-off if you get the value beforehand. Again, I can't provide that. So I recommend to people to know what's in your collection now and write it down and have something that says where you bought it, who it's by, are you related to that person, and to kind of be proactive in that. And if you are interested in donating things to, or if you just want to do research, if you're not sure what a thing is, you can get in touch with me. I will provide reference services to people trying to research their art. I've done that in the past. Recently, I had a request to possibly help identify some paintings by Clement Nye Swift. who we have in the collection, and I was able to help that patron to get some titles for the paintings that they had, and also some exhibit history for those things. So yeah, I can provide some, reference help with that as well.
Okay, and I was thinking too, I know a couple of friends who are appraisers, certified appraisers.
Yes.
And it's usually $250, like right up front. It's almost like, it's like anything else. I mean, you're not paying them for just their time. You're paying them for all the education, the certification, and everything goes along with it. And you're paying them for their expertise. It would be.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, one of the questions I get really oftentimes with patrons in here is like, what's the most valuable painting in the collection? And my answer is art is worth what someone will pay for it. So that's how I think about the art market, is it's worth what someone will pay for it. So if there's like someone who's really interested and would pay you $1 million, then it's worth $1 million. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. One of my old art instructors used to have this odd saying. He used to say, one man's broccoli is another's asparagus.
Yeah.
It was just like one of those quirky things that he would say. And he had a lot of quirky things to say. But yeah, at some point in time, because I'm we're coming up on grant funding season, local cultural councils. What would be the possibility of hiring one or two appraisers to do almost like an antiques roadshow where, bring out your stuff? Would that be, has it been done? Is it a possibility? Because boy, this is just stuff, I always have this vision of someone's closet with that shoebox or whatever, or behind the clothes, or in the attic or whatever. Yeah.
It's an interesting idea for an event. We had recently someone come in who was an antique bookseller who gave a talk, and then I believe like helped some or the people who attended to possibly value some of the books. I think we brought up some of my older volumes here from the library to say like, hey, what's this worth? So not outside of the realm of possibility if it was an event that people were interested in.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember in two distinct cases, must have been maybe 25 years ago now, one perhaps in Salem, the other one more than likely in Gloucester. Similar situations, both had to do with the sale of a home. The one in particular that I remember the most was a couple walked into the house, they were checking it out. They had put a bid on it. They closed and they came, and the husband had noticed this painting hanging over the fireplace. And it was pretty much, we took what we want to take, the rest we're leaving, that's the deal.
Yeah.
And he had, that head tilt looking at that painting. And probably in the back of his mind, gee, I hope they leave that behind.
Yeah.
Well, they come from the closing, they're walking towards the house, and it's trash day, and what's sitting on top of a trash barrel is that painting. So he goes, wow, good timing. Really good timing. It was a Martin Johnson Heed that was valued. Not only did it pay off the house, it could have paid off probably 12 homes.
Oh my God.
And that was the second one that happened. It was the exact same sort of circumstance. So yeah, I mean, everybody loves those stories because it's just like when you buy a scratch ticket, Yeah. We were just like, why did that guy hold up the whole line by saying, I want one of these and one of, they're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're all the same.
Yeah. But it's still 1 in a million, because most of the time it's like, well, I might be able to identify an artist, but
Yeah.
It's $250.
Yeah. And I can only imagine the appraiser when he brought it to him, who probably said, look, I got to clean this because it's loaded with soot from sitting over an operating fireplace.
Oh yeah.
And I can only imagine their heart like bursting out of their chest going, oh my God.
Yeah.
I got a paradise.
The conservation fees too, if you don't know exactly how much something is worth and you're like, oh, I got to spend a couple $1,000s to get it cleaned and I'm not sure if I can make that back. Yeah.
Well, there's a question for you. Once you get the appraisal fee, as is, because they always give you the two, as is, it's $150,000. Restored, it's $250,000. And it's going to cost you $15,000 to have it conserved.
Yep.
So can you go to a resource, a bank, and say, hey, this painting's worth $150,000. I want to use this as collateral for the conservation, which
I have no idea. Never tried it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good for us if we ever had that opportunity.
I would assume so. Yeah, if you wanted to get a loan for that kind of thing. I mean, but yeah, and for museum institutions, for us in particular, conservation is grant funded. And we've had a patron in the past who was interested in specifically funding conservation of paintings, and wanted their money to go towards that. So those kinds of things are, because it's outside of the budget. I mean, we were talking about George Washington getting conserved recently, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but he was between 20 and 25,000 just for the painting, not including the frame. So that was a big number for a painting. And so the larger,
and how much additionally would it add to the value of the current value of the painting? So or is that not just the point? The point is you want to conserve it because you don't want it to be falling off the stretchers. So
there's an interesting idea with that, because we have an insurance appraisal that was done a few years back now, that has values for all those paintings. I'm pretty sure the cost of conservation is more than what that painting is actually technically worth, because it's an unknown artist. I might be wrong about that, but if it's not, it's close. But for us, it's not necessarily the monetary value, it's the historical value. So it's worth it for the library because that painting has documented provenance of having been displayed in various places throughout the city. It has a real historical importance to the collection. So it was worth investing that money that we were able to get through grants. But if it was a private owner, that might not have been the decision.
Yeah. Now, my wife is from Detroit, and Detroit was in turmoil during the Great Recession, which is just a buzzword for the Second Great Depression.
Yeah. Are we in the third or fourth now?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It seems that recessions, depressions, downturns, and everything have chased me from the day I graduated from the MFA program.
Oh yeah, I'm a millennial, so it's all we've known.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like all these rivers to cross and no bridges.
Yeah,
we have to swim across. But Bruegel's The Wedding, which is owned by the DIA, was so valued, not just emotionally, but instrumentally, that it was said, and I don't know if there's a great urban myth, but it was said that the sale of that painting could have pulled the city of Detroit out of receivership. They did a referendum, and basically people said in a very colloquial way, hell no.
Yeah. I remember this, and when I was in school, the example they gave was the Rose Art Museum, which is in Mass. I believe it's in I believe it's at a college. I'm not entirely sure, but but it was the Rose Art Museum at some point was either pressured to, or the ask was made for them to sell some of their collections, and that money to go towards, I believe, towards the college. I think maybe Brandeis. I was gonna say, I think it was Brandeis. So so that was the example that was always given in in my classes to discuss this issue, because and it's not outside of some people's minds. The library's collection is very valuable. Ethically speaking, from a museum standpoint, from a curator standpoint, it is not ethical to sell a work that's been accessioned into a permanent collection to, as they say, keep the lights on. Because these things were donated for the most part by people who were donating them with the assumption that they were in trust, that they were for display, that they were for educational purposes, that they were for the people of New Bedford. To deaccession them and remove them from that, you have to have a good reason. Which is not to say it's impossible. The museums do accession things. That's a normal part of a museum operating. But to deaccession something, you have to have a reason. It has to be the condition is too poor and it's not worth either historically or monetary conserving in our collection. We can sell it. Or there's a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, political correctness, for example, there's something that was discovered about the artist, and it's like, oh my God, how can you have that monstrous work in your place?
Or discovering it was a fake, it was misrepresented when it was purchased or donated. So there's a lot of reasons, but those reasons have to be about the art and not about a gain that you can get. Mm-hmm. And then also, the American Alliance for Museums stipulates that in collections policies, in your deaccession policy, for it to be a legit policy, that it has to state that any funds made from deaccessioning an object, if you do sell it, which is one of the ways that some things are disposed of, that those funds have to go directly back into the collection itself. So it either has to go back to purchasing new art for the collection, or they allow for what their wording is, the direct care of collection. So or it can go into a conservation fund, say, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So for an accredited museum, that's the standard. And that's, of course, the standard we like to follow as well. But yeah, it's definitely a question that gets brought up. And it's great to have industry standards that say no.
It certainly is. And based on all of that, is there one piece in the New Bedford collection that if push came to shove and somebody would say, hey, without knowing what you just said, hey, we could sell this and get out of this mess, what piece would that be?
Well, I mean, we were talking about the importance of the beer stats earlier. Monetarily speaking, the beer stats are also very valuable. So those are usually the ones where people think, oh, well, that's, we could sell that and make however much money. But it wouldn't be enough to get, to really make a difference, to be honest, one influx of cash is not going to do a ton for a city government. But and of course there's been dealers who are interested in buying them, and we're kind of like, nope.
They actually approach you, or they actually approach you?
Oh, every once in a while I'll get one.
Hey, I got a guy in Abu Dhabi who's really interested in this. Yeah.
Every once in a while, but no. Yeah. So yeah, those are kind of the people. It's not the first time I've heard that, to be sure, but we're very protective of that because, and we want to be clear that, like, no, we follow industry standards, and the other thing, legally speaking, these paintings are under the control of the trustees of the New Bedford Free Public Library. So this collection it's of course for the city of New Bedford. The library is a city department, but final say for the disposition of the paintings is with the trustees of the New Bedford Free Public Library. So that would have to be, that's kind of the first obstacle. And the trustees are, of course, first and foremost interested in the health and use of the library itself. So.
Well, I think this is going to be one of the fastest podcast episodes I've ever done. And, we're like winding, down towards the end. And I was actually going to bring the magic wand question up earlier, but I end up using it in general at the end. So, we're getting to that point. If you had that magic wand, but you only had one wish in your position as curator, what would that wish be and why?
Oh, I have so many wishes.
I can only have one.
And it changes year to year because sometimes I get my wishes. I suppose. All right. So like my top priorities would be environment. So I would like a state-of-the-art, like envelope system in this building that controls temperature and humidity perfectly all the time for everything throughout the building. Of course, we work in a historic building. We do our best, and we do a great job for most of the time. But you know, we can't control everything. So I'd like to be able to really control the environment in a way we're not able to at this point.
Yeah, because I mean that work, TikTok every day. It's been hanging about for a long time. I remember, doing genealogy up in the genealogy room, and speaking with Paul, and amazing with all of the duties he really had. And everybody just thought he was the chief genealogist and that's it. And how he could print without being in a rush, and it was all
of his handwritten indexes of the newspapers. Oh my God.
Yeah. That in itself is part of the collection, I'm assuming. I mean, I saw it happening. Yeah. Now for the city in itself, with all the art, with the creativity that's going on, just when we think we've plateaued, we jump up to another level. My sister-in-law came in at the beginning of June for a visit, and she had been, her first visit here from Michigan was before the pandemic, that summer before the pandemic. And she said, I love the city the first time, but wow, what have you guys been up to? She said it's just like an explosion. She noticed what was going on. What do you think is next? What is the next thing that we need in your estimation?
Well, one of the, I would love to shout out our at City Hall, New Bedford Creative, and the arts and culture plan that they put through. I mean, it was a very concentrated effort in the city to support the arts, which I think has made a noticeable difference. Having sculptures and things in the park downtown, having beautiful street art, like there's murals, like there's been a lot of like really great work that's been done. What's next? I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping with our collection, my goal is always to expand our reach and to get as many people in the city to visit and, appreciate what we have, and use what we have, as possible. So I think one of the things with that is like increasing the New Bedford's reputation as an art destination, like that you can come visit here and see art at the Whaling Museum, at the Art Museum, here, Roadstone stuff, all these places, and the local galleries, Gallery X, and all the other places downtown. Like, so I don't know, I guess I would say, like expanding our reach, I think is the next. I think we've got a good reputation in the South Coast, and we can kind of branch out a little bit.
Do you think, this is news of this week, and I rarely bring, anything that's time oriented into a podcast because we stack these up, for distribution. But the apparent withdrawal of CVPA, the College of Visual Performing Arts at the University of Massachusetts, from the historic Star Store building, and because you are a public figure, if you don't want to answer, just say, I just rather stay away from that. So let's just say, if they do leave, we will survive. How do you think we will survive? What do you think could fill that vacuum?
So I just read that yesterday, and I was surprised. But I don't know that I can comment too much on it. I think my hope is that space continues to be used for, they've done some great exhibits down there, and of course have been student exhibits and also outside. So my hope is that they continue, that something takes over in that space and continues to use it as an art space. So that would be
Yeah, I've never, I did not read every single last line of the news articles, nor the
I have to admit,
commentary.
me either, yeah.
Yeah, nor the commentary, but from what I could see, because I would think that this would be a really a salient point, is there goes another gallery.
Hmm.
You know, we need exhibition space badly. You can't get everything. You can't get your aesthetic buzz online all the time. You've got to see the real stuff. So
Yes.
to me, that's the biggest hole, because most people really don't know what the students are up to. I mean, a majority of people. I mean, they're in the studios. You really never see them. You're
Yeah.
only familiar with that.
The first floor area.
The first
yeah.
floor
Yeah.
area. Exactly. So that would be obviously that's going to be an interesting thing to do.
Well, and my big, as a librarian, I'm very interested in promoting free exhibit space as well, and opportunities to provide free access to things. I think it's a hindrance to the art community if you're putting a barrier on something of needing to pay to go see work, because you're limiting your audience, and then you're only getting a certain type of person or certain group of people who can go see your work. And I don't think most artists want that. I think most artists want to see have as many people look at their work as possible, and I agree with that. So
yeah, exactly. Wow, I mean, there's so many more questions I want to ask, so rather than ask you another question, is there one thing you would like to leave us with?
I would just say, if you're in the area, come visit the library, come see the art collection. If you have a question, if any of your listeners have a question for me, when the art room is open, I'm at my desk. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to talk about this collection. So that I'm here and willing to have conversations with people that want to come in and talk about our art. So
Great. I think I'd like to have you back on at some point to speak about photography, because we didn't even hit on that, and sculpture as well, because those are two other areas that really need to be looked at a little bit closer. And
I don't know if your podcast has visual, but behind me, I've got my bus behind me here.
Yeah. Well, we don't, but we're evolving. We are evolving. So with that in mind, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Today's guest was Alexandra Copeland, the curator of the New Bedford Free Public Library. And it was a wonderful conversation. And if you missed it, just go back onto your favorite podcast source and look it up and listen to this great conversation. Thanks so much. See you next time. And remember, until then, be kind to each other. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.